So what we've learnt so far is that GDP is a really key concept. It's the way that all economies measure their economic growth and therefore their economic success. But increasingly this idea is being called into question. People are beginning to think, is this right? Should we be measuring success according to how much we're producing? Is it right that countries are trying always to produce more and more and more? Is that good for people? Is that good for the environment? Is that good for our country as a whole? So people are beginning to think about a new idea, and I have a short video here which I think explains this, the thinking behind this idea really well.
The Simple Show explains gross national happiness. This is the fourth Dragon King of Bhutan, a beautiful country at the eastern end of the Himalayas. He became king at the age of 17 in 1972. It was then when he had to decide what should be the philosophy behind his reign. He looked at other countries and noticed in most of them the government and the people strive for economical wealth. And those few who achieve this goal usually live a comfortable life. But on the downside, many other people live in misery, poverty, or social isolation. Also, in the ruthless hunt for money, huge parts of the environment are often destroyed. This couldn't be the right path for Bhutan. The concept of gross national happiness was born. The primary idea of GNH is that every human being aspires for happiness, and a country's development should also be measured in its citizens' happiness. The fourth Dragon King's challenge, therefore, was figuring out how to balance economic development with the emotional and spiritual well-being of his people. Although economical growth can't be the only goal, a flourishing economy gives the government the funds needed to provide a working health and educational system, as well as certain living standards. Because being healthy, having opportunities for the future, and knowing that security, a steady income, housing, or well-balanced time use are guaranteed is crucial for people to be happy. But furthermore, people get a lot of positive energy from being with others and sharing interests, participating in cultural life, and to hold up local traditions and cultural heritage lead to a stronger community feeling. Healthy family relationships, advocating community activities, and religious aspects are factors for achieving happiness. It gives the Bhutanese people a strong sense of values and identity. The fourth Dragon King reigned 34 years, basing his decisions on all factors of gross national happiness, asking himself, what makes Bhutan's people happy? And the fourth Dragon King lived by example, leading a very simple life. In fact, he believed so strongly in the concept of GNH, he even decided to hand over sovereignty to the people. In 2006, he retired as king at the age of 52 and changed the course of history. 2 years later, in 2008, Bhutan elected its first representative parliament. Since then, the idea of gross national happiness has taken quite some momentum outside of Bhutan, with other countries and people around the world thinking about adopting the GNH approach to strive for development with values and to make the world a happier place.
So we're not saying here that economic growth is not important. Economic growth is important. It's important, as we saw in the video, to have a successful economy, because that will provide the funds needed to provide healthcare and education and infrastructure for all of the people in the country. However, what we're saying in this idea of gross national happiness is that perhaps GDP is not the only measure of success, or even the best measure of success. Perhaps we should have a broader measure of success that includes the well-being of all of the people. So some of the things that are thought about in that idea of gross national happiness are things like social investment, that we should be thinking when we measure the success of an economy, we should be thinking about what's the level of infrastructure like? Are there good roads? Are there good communication networks, railways, airports and so on? How about education? Does every child have access to high quality education? We know that some of the countries with the biggest GDP in the world, some children don't have access to good education. And how about healthcare? America is, the USA has the biggest economy in the world, and yet many of its people don't have access to good healthcare. And then there's things like clean water and housing. So that social investment is seen as a key part of this idea of gross national happiness. And the environment is another thing. And the environment lobby is a big place now where people are beginning to say that GDP is not the best measure, because if we all strive to just produce more and more and more, then we're going to degrade our environment more and more and more. We need to be thinking about pollution and reducing the levels of pollution. We need to be cutting waste. We shouldn't be a society that just produces more and consumes more and more. We should instead take care of nature, and we should think about the way that we use land in a way that will safeguard our environment for future generations. So G&H really tries to focus not just on how much is produced, but on the quality of life of all citizens. And part of that is about material wealth that comes from GDP. You know, we all want to have a phone, we all want to have a fridge and a washing machine and so on. But we also want to have a positive mental state. We want to feel happy. We don't want to feel stressed all the time because we're working too hard or we're worried about losing our jobs. And we don't want to suffer from crime, and crime it goes hand in hand with inequality. So it's these things that really come to the fore when we're thinking about gross national happiness as opposed to GDP. However, it has to be said, right now in the world, GDP is still the biggest measure of economic success, and it's the one that countries all over the world use and in a way that measures the success of their economy. Okay, we're going to finish there. There are a few questions now.